Walking pneumonia worries me a little bit, but before I tell you why, I've got two questions that I need answering. What is it, and why doesn't anybody seem to know about it? Let's get into it. Let's start with the pneumonia part. Pneumonia is an acute infection that causes inflammation in the air sacs in one or both of your lungs, often causing them to fill with fluid or pus. So nasty, dangerous stuff. But what's the walking part about? Well, this is often a milder form of pneumonia, meaning the person doesn't need admission to a hospital or excessive bed rest, and I guess they can walk around with it. And this is why I don't like the term. It almost makes the condition sound harmless or trivial, whereas in reality, walking pneumonia can be serious, as you'll find out in a minute when I tell you a little story about walking pneumonia. So walking pneumonia is more of an American term, and this explains why people, including doctors, aren't familiar with it in the UK. It's because we call it a different name. We call it atypical pneumonia. And I think that's a better name for it because this is a slightly unusual pneumonia, largely because it's caused by these atypical, unusual bacteria. So let me introduce you to the three culprits guilty of causing most of walking pneumonia. So Mycoplasma actually makes up about 1/5 of all cases of pneumonia. So it's not as uncommon as you might think, but it is atypical in the way that it behaves. As opposed to your standard typical pneumonia, which hits you hard and hits you fast, Mycoplasma pneumonia comes in slow, causing a persistent dry cough that builds and worsens over time before eventually, usually, settling on its own. So this isn't the type of chlamydia you might be thinking of, but like Mycoplasma, this is also a tricky customer in the way that it behaves. Again, it starts off slowly, but with this one, you might feel that you're getting better before you actually get worse with a hoarse, dry, low-grade cough persisting for weeks or sometimes even months, and that might even be with antibiotics. Then again, this bug can cause an illness that's so mild, you might not even know you have it, unlike our third and final culprit, which can be nasty. But to tell you about this one, I need to take you back to 1976. During this year, there was a gathering for war veterans in Philadelphia. They were there for a Legionnaires' Convention, what should have been a normal event. But then people started falling sick, with fevers, chills, coughs, and for some it got much, much worse, with confusion and even organ failure. 221 people got symptoms. 34 died. This outbreak led to the discovery of a new bug called Legionella pneumophila. As it turns out, this bug was thriving in the hotel's air conditioning system, and Legionella is a master of multiplying and surviving in moist conditions, so it often lurks in water systems and spreads through fine mist and fine droplets. Unlike our first two culprits, which come on slowly, gradually, giving you mild to moderate symptoms, Legionella can come on far more quickly and more severely, so it doesn't feel right calling it a walking pneumonia. It's more like walking trouble if you don't catch it early. But it only accounts for less than 2% of pneumonias, so it is unusual and rare. So if any of this so far is ringing a bell, touching a nerve, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below if you feel comfortable to do so. But now, I want to tell you why it scares me. So I'm not necessarily afraid of getting it myself. Trust me, I'd take it over typical pneumonia any day of the week. My fear lies in, as a doctor, missing the diagnosis or mistreating the condition, because it is a tricky customer from the doctor's perspective for a number of reasons too. For example, with symptoms. Persistent cough, feeling tired, able to soldier on with your daily activities. Most of the time, I'd say that sounds viral. And most of the time, I'd be right. But not all the time. I'll leave a chart at the end of the video explaining how we tell the difference between an atypical pneumonia and something like the flu. But it's not just the symptoms that worry me. It's who it also affects. Walking pneumonia doesn't typically hit the usual suspects. Sure, if you're elderly or you have a weakened immune system, you will be more vulnerable to picking up these bugs. But we don't associate pneumonia with younger people, and they are the people who are also susceptible to getting it. So that's another reason that it flies under the radar, I guess. But it's not just the who gets it, it's the when it happens. Walking pneumonia seems to pop up in outbreaks every 3 to 4 years before it just tails off again, and we forget about it, and it falls off our radar until boom, it's back again. So you really have to have a high index of suspicion and be aware of when outbreaks are happening, but also piecing together things like people using the same hot tubs or air conditioning units, young adults close together in workspaces or in dormitories. But here's the next kicker. Even when you go to see your doctor, it's tough to pick up the signs. Usually pneumonia is actually fairly straightforward to diagnose as a doctor. There's usually signs on physical examination like crackly sounds when you listen to someone's lung. But with walking pneumonia, often the signs are much more subtle or not there at all. And in fact, the only way to pick it up is with a chest x-ray. So you can see there's a hell of a lot of potholes that you could stumble in here along the way. But there's one more, and that's the treatment. So the vast majority of time, these symptoms will represent a viral infection, in which case I won't prescribe antibiotics. And that's the right thing to do because viruses don't respond to antibiotics. But what if I overestimate things and think this is a typical pneumonia? Well, in that situation, I might prescribe penicillin. Turns out, these bugs are often resistant to penicillin. So we have to choose a different family of antibiotics, and that will be dependent on where you live in the world. Look, all of these things are tricky challenges for doctors to navigate, but we are aware of these challenges and aware of this condition just under the name atypical pneumonia rather than walking pneumonia. Okay, but there are a number of positives here. Walking pneumonia, the vast majority of time, is mild and will actually get better without antibiotics. But if needed, antibiotics do work. I said I'd give you a chart at the end telling you the differences symptom-wise between walking pneumonia and the flu, and that's coming up in just a second. But if you want video format, then I've got a video on typical pneumonia right here, but also on flu and the differences between different types of respiratory tract infections. But thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon.